As we weave the future of science, the same excitement resonates in recalling the past. Did religion actually stifle scientific progress, or did it pivot scientific breakthroughs? We will find that out as we get a glimpse of what it was for science during the medieval age. Good day, everyone. Welcome to SciEd Talakayan Podcast. I'm your moderator, Erniel Grizer Ekle. And today, we'll be exploring a thought-provoking question. Did religion stifle scientific progress, or did it help inspire and drive scientific breakthroughs? Throughout history, science and religion have sometimes worked together and at other times stood in tension. From debates about evolution and cosmology to the role of faith in motivating scientific discovery, this topic continues to spark meaningful conversations around the world. To explore this issue from multiple perspectives, we are joined by three panelists with different viewpoints.
Good day, everyone. I am Vivian Tan. I hold the view that might surprise people, that the relationship of religious-based institutions didn't just coexist with science and medicine, but they helped build their foundations. These paved the way for the first formal healthcare systems, where these institutions played a pivotal role in human advancement. This podcast is more about history, so we can appreciate the present more.
Good day, everyone. I am Regina Megabiles, and in today's discussion, I would like to take a closer and more critical look at the relationship between religion and science during the medieval period. While religious institutions played a major role in preserving knowledge and establishing early universities, historians also note that they sometimes placed limits on scientific inquiry. In this discussion today, I will show you how institutions that supported learning also regulated or restricted the ideas that challenge religious teaching. This history shows that the development of science was shaped by tensions between faith, philosophy, and emerging scientific thought.
Hello everyone, I'm Irish Uduhan and my focus on today's podcast's topic is on the middle ground. Rather than seeing religion as only a catalyst or a stifler of scientific progress in the medieval age, I view it as the foundational framework. I'll be exploring how the church both funded the birth of universities and defend the limits of inquiry.
Thank you to our panelists for joining us today. Let's begin our discussion and explore how religion and science have interacted across history and in the modern world. To start, let us ask each of our panelists today about their perspectives on the question, Handmaiden of Faith. To what extent did religious institutions accelerate or stifle scientific progress in the medieval age? Let us start with Mom V, followed by Mom Reg, and Mom Irish.
I'd like to share why I believe religious institutions actually accelerated scientific progress during the medieval period. Back then, people didn't see science as something that competed with religion. They saw it as the handmaiden of faith, meaning science helped people understand God's creation more deeply. This support became especially clear in the institutions the church established. Monasteries and cathedral schools became the main learning centers of Europe. They preserved important texts, taught natural philosophy, and trained future scholars. Later on, this grew into the early universities. Religious institutions also shaped healthcare. Many medieval hospitals were run by monasteries or religious orders. These weren't just places for prayer. They provided organized care, hired physicians, and treated patients in ways that resemble early clinical practice. Monasteries themselves preserved medical manuscripts, experimented with herbal remedies, and ran infirmaries where they treated their own communities. Another major contribution was how Christian learning centers welcomed the knowledge from outside of Europe. They translated and taught important Arabic and Greek works. This exchange enriched European scholarship and kept scientific inquiry alive. What all of this shows is that the medieval church didn't just support science, it played a major role in keeping learning alive. These institutions gave scholars structure, resources, and a stable intellectual environment. This history matters today, especially in science education. One major research question now is how students' backgrounds and beliefs affect how they engage with science. Often, science is seen as if it must be completely separated from belief systems. But history shows that science has grown within different cultural and institutional settings. So when we say that science was a handmaiden of faith, it means faith gave science a home through universities, hospitals, and monasteries. And that support allowed scientific knowledge not only to survive, but to thrive and also to grow.
All right. Thanks, Ma'am Vivian. Let's hear from Ma'am Regine this time.
I appreciate the points raised by Ma'am Vivian about the role of religious institutions in preserving knowledge. But I would like to emphasize that the relationship between religion and science in the medieval period was more complicated. So when classical Greek philosophy began returning to Western Europe, scholars faced the challenge of reconciling these ideas with Christian theology. One important example was the attempt to reconcile the cosmology described in Plato's Timaeus with the biblical creation story found in the book of Genesis. Medieval scholars tried to interpret these philosophical ideas in ways that will not contradict Christian doctrine. According to the historian David Lindbergh, scholars often attempt to harmonize Greek philosophy with Christian theology instead of treating them as separate explanation of nature. A well-known example in the 12th century, scholar William of Conches, who argued that studying nature was a legitimate way of understanding God's creation. However, he also emphasized that natural explanation should never contradict the authority of the scripture. This shows that the scientific explanation were acceptable only when they remained consistent with the religious doctrine. To address the tension between philosophy and theology, medieval thinkers developed two major approaches. First, they interpreted ancient philosophical texts in ways that align with Christian teaching. The second, they argued that natural causes explained how the world operates while divine creation itself remained a matter of faith. These strategies allowed classical knowledge to be studied, but also ensured that theological authority remained central. This tension eventually became clearer in medieval universities. One famous example is the Articles of Condemnation in 1277, issued by Etienne Tempier, a bishop of Paris. These condemnations prohibited certain philosophical ideas, especially those derived from Aristotelian philosophy, because they were believed to conflict the Christian doctrine. These historical examples shows that while church supported education and universities, it also regulates which idea could safely taught.
There you go. Thank you, Ma'am Reg. Let's hear from Ma'am Irish now.
Thank you, Ma'am Vivian and Ma'am Regina. It's fascinating because you both describe the same reality from different angles. My standpoint is that medieval church acted as a safe harbor. It provided a secure place for the ship of science to be built and maintained. But that harbor naturally restricted the ship from sailing into forbidden waters. It wasn't science versus religion. It was science growing within a religious framework. Even before universities were fixed in one place, they began as migratory schools. Intellectual guilds that embrace a rationalistic turn where reason was applied to both theology and natural philosophy. These guilds secured high-level patronage from popes and emperors, allowing for standardized curricula and legal immunity for scholars. We even see this in the study of Computus, where the church mandated astronomical observation simply to ensure the calendar for Easter was accurate. Imagine? However, we must acknowledge the monastic filter. While figures like Charlemagne preserved the works of Pliny and Macrobius, they did so only because these texts served as the handmaiden to theology. But when reason tried to become the primary influencer of truth, as with Peter Abelard, it faced fierce pushback. Let us remember that the Church preserved the works of Aristotle and Plato, but it only allowed that knowledge to flow within the horizon of faith. This history mirrors the critical debates in modern science education. We cannot separate a student's cultural or religious views from the learning process. Everyone has their own safe harbor to assimilate new information. Just as medieval scholars navigated a religious framework, modern students must reconcile scientific theories with their deeply held beliefs. The lesson here is that science do not have to conflict with belief to progress. By understanding the handmaiden model, we can design curricula that respect a student's identity while still fostering rigorous scientific inquiry. We learn from the past to become drivers of change in the present, restricting what should not be, while remaining boldly progressive in what we can still achieve.
Thank you to all our panelists for those insightful perspectives. From our discussion, we can see that the relationship between religion and science during the medieval period was complex. It was sometimes supportive, sometimes restrictive, and often shaped by the social and intellectual environment of the time. With that in mind, let's move forward and explore our next question as we continue examining how religion and science interact in shaping knowledge and progress. Building in our discussion about the role of religious institutions in education and knowledge preservation, it's fascinating to consider how this influence extended to healthcare and medicine during the medieval period. With that said, I'd like to ask our panelists, to what extent did religious institutions shape medical practices in the Middle Ages? And did their involvement help or hinder the development of scientific medicine? Let's go back to Ma'am Vivienne again.
To continue my stand, I believe religious institutions were not barriers to medieval medicine. They were actually some of its biggest supporters. First, the Church played a major role in building the early European universities. Students learned the works of Hippocrates, Galen, and Avicenna through structured lessons, commentaries, and exams. This tells us that medical education was taken seriously and had a proper academic home. And because these universities drew scholars from many regions, knowledge spread and developed much faster than it would have in isolation. Second, religious institutions helped shape medieval hospitals. Many of the hospitals we read about, those founded by bishops, abbeys, and religious orders, were not just places for prayer. They were functioning healthcare centers. They hired physicians, followed routines for treatment, and cared for patients. Third, monasteries themselves were hubs of medical activity. Monks preserved ancient medical texts, grew medicinal herbs, and ran their own infirmaries. They treated members of their communities using a mix of practical knowledge and spiritual care. Records and archaeological findings show that monastic healing involved diets, herbal remedies, and sometimes even minor surgical procedures. So, monasteries played a huge role in keeping medical knowledge alive. Fourth, Religious communities help document and spread knowledge about plants and animals, information that was essential for healing. And finally, we can't ignore the influence of Christian charity. Caring for the sick was seen as a religious duty, and this belief encouraged the growth of hospitals across Europe. This history connects to medical education, explaining how institutions shape the way knowledge is taught, trusted, and passed on. Today, researchers study how learning environments and institutional support affect a scientific and medical training. The medieval example shows that when institutions value learning and care, they can help science and medicine grow. This only reflects that religious institutions shaped medieval medicine in almost every way. They built universities, ran hospitals, preserved important texts, documented medicinal plants, and encouraged healthcare through their teachings on charity. Instead of holding medicine back, they helped organize it, protect it, and allow it to grow.
Thank you, Ma'am Vivian. Let's hear from Ma'am Regine this time.
I also appreciate Ma'am Vivian's discussion about how monasteries and religious institutions supported medicine and hospitals. It is true that many hospitals in medieval Europe were founded by religious communities and that caring for the sick was considered a Christian duty. However, when we look at how medical knowledge itself developed during the medieval period, we can see that it was still strongly shaped by the reliance on traditional authorities. Looking specifically at medicine and natural history, we can also see how reliance on traditional authority sometimes slowed scientific progress during the medieval period. Medical education in medieval universities relied on classical authorities such as Hippocrates, Galen, and Avicenna. Students mainly learned through lectures and commentaries, so knowledge was often based on interpreting established texts rather than experimentation. Because of this reliance on authority, medicine remained closely tied to the humoral theory, which explained health through the balance of the bodily fluids. While useful of organizing medical practice, it limited new physiological explanation. Natural history followed a similar pattern, with scholars compiling descriptions from early writings rather than conducting extensive observations, preserving inherited knowledge instead of producing new discoveries. So these ideas were shaped by the medieval worldview, which saw the universe as a divinely ordered hierarchy where everything had a proper place. While this provided stability, it reinforced traditional explanation. Philosophical tension also existed. Again, Plato's Timaeus described the universe as formed by the divine craftsman organizing existing matter, while Christian doctrine taught creation from nothing, creating challenges for the scholars reconciling Greek philosophy with Christian theology. At the end, this example shows that although religious institutions supported learning, science knowledge developed within defined intellectual boundaries.
Thank you, Ma'am Reg. Let's hear from Ma'am Irish this time.
Thank you, Ma'am Vivian and Ma'am Regina. To bridge your views, we have to look at how the medieval mind actually functioned. First, we must acknowledge the institutional acceleration Ma'am Vivian mentioned. A key figure is Constantine the African at the monastery of Monte Cassino. By translating Greco-Arabic works, he repackaged medicine, transforming it from a simple craft into a learned philosophical profession. However, as Ma'am Regina noted, this led to a heavy reliance on authorities like Galen. But here is the neutral pivot. For most people, from monks to peasants, a philosophical tension between naturalism and supernaturalism simply did not exist. They weren't looking for a debate. They were looking for a cure. They are using prayer and physicians as partners, not rivals. And then, From a neutral perspective, medical studies emerged in cathedral schools as part of the liberal arts, remember? This shift was driven by the pursuit of social status as much as public health. By elevating medicine to a scholarly discipline, physicians protected their professional identity through these ancient texts. We see this institutional support in Guy de Chauliac, physician to three popes, whose work helped institutionalize surgery at universities like Montpellier and Bologna. Finally, the Church acted as a scientific archivist. Without the preservation of Aristotle's botanical studies, medieval healers would have lacked the foundational knowledge for drug therapy. By the 12th century, these empirical remedies were finally systematized into a pharmaceutical science. In my view, the Church wasn't stifling medicine. It was providing a safe harbor. It allowed Galen's teleological view, which is the body as a divine masterpiece, to actually flourish. The Church provided the intellectual peace necessary for medicine to gain social standing, even if that same peace ultimately defined the horizon for new discovery.
From the discussion, we can see that religious institutions in medieval medicine played a dual role. They preserved medical knowledge and provided care, yet they also regulated which practices and ideas were acceptable. The contrasting perspectives of our panelists highlight the complexity of this relationship. Considering the historical dynamics of religious institutions, we can reflect on its relevance for teaching today. So let's now hear from our panelists as they answer this question. How can understanding the interplay between belief systems and scientific inquiry in history inform more effective and inclusive science education practices as of today? Let's again hear from Ma'am Vivi.
Studying history has really changed how I think about teaching science and medicine. Learning about how medieval monasteries, the early universities, and hospitals supported learning made me realize that science doesn't grow on its own. It needs people working together, shared values, and a real commitment to helping others. I want my students to see science as more than just facts and theories. It's more than what we learn from the four corners of the classroom. I want them to understand that science is shaped by people, culture, and spaces we create for learning. For me, teaching isn't just about explaining content. It's about experiencing and building a classroom where students feel welcome and included, no matter their background or beliefs. If science was able to grow within different belief systems in the past, then I believe it can still be inclusive and meaningful today.
All right, thanks Ma'am Vivi. Let's hear from Ma'am Regine this time.
Studying this part of history has influenced how I think about teaching science today. One important lesson is that institutions can shape knowledge in both positive and limiting ways. Medieval universities created spaces for learning, but their heavy reliance on authority sometimes prevented scholars from questioning traditional ideas. This reminds me that modern science education should encourage students not only to learn established theories, but also to question and investigate them. For me, teaching science means creating an environment where students feel free to explore evidence, test ideas, and critically evaluate information. Scientific progress depends on curiosity and open inquiry. Looking back at the medieval experience reminds us that science develops best when educational institutions support both knowledge and intellectual freedom.
There you go. Thank you, Ma'am Reg. Let's hear from Ma'am Irish now.
As a teacher, these readings provided a vital perspective on how we can teach science as a body of knowledge without isolating its history. By acknowledging the context in which concepts were born, we can help our students cultivate a balance, recognizing their own belief systems without compromising what is factual. The medieval lesson for the modern classroom is that we should allow our students to learn from the past and progress with what we have learned. We can teach them to be appreciative of scientific rigor and become drivers of change, all while ensuring they do not have to lose their cultural or personal identities in the process. Ultimately, history shows that science is most effective when it is taught not as an enemy of culture, but as a bridge within it.
From these reflections, we see two contrasting approaches. One emphasizes how historical religious institutions fostered collaboration, inclusivity, and meaningful learning, while the other highlights that authority and tradition sometimes limited inquiry and critical thinking. A neutral perspective would recognize that both aspects were present, where science thrived within supportive structures but faced constraints when ideas conflicted with established beliefs. Together, these insights remind us that the way we design learning environments today can either nurture curiosity or unintentionally restrict it. That is all for now in this episode, but before we end this rich discussion, let us hear the concluding statements from our panelists.
My stand has a significant impact on how I perceive the teaching of science. Reflecting on the history of the development of science makes me realize that it did not simply develop out of nothing, since it is a product of the existence of support systems that encourage learning and caring. Understanding the way in which religious bodies contributed to the development of medicine and the teaching of science helps students to realize the source of the development of science and the importance of the systems that support it. Science is experiential, inclusive, and reflective.
Reflecting on medieval science shows that religious constitutions had a complex role in scientific development. They preserved knowledge and established universities, but also they set intellectual boundaries that shape how ideas could be explored. Understanding this helps students see that science developed within cultural and institutional context. It also highlights the importance of questioning, observation, and intellectual openness in modern science education.
To encapsulate what I have learned, we must recognize that science in the Middle Ages was not an isolated pursuit, but one profoundly shaped by the unique institutional and cultural landscape of its time. By examining both the scaffolding provided by the Church and the intellectual boundaries it maintained, we gain a more nuanced merit of how science progresses, not always in a straight line, but within the context of its era. As educators, we bring these lessons into the classroom to help our students analyze how the scientific concepts we take for granted today were forged in the tensions of the past. My goal is to cultivate a science classroom that is sensitive to our present times, one that empowers students to be proactive drivers of change without compromising their integrity. By understanding the safe harbors of history, we can teach our students to be wisely restrictive of what should not be, yet boldly progressive in what we have the potential to achieve.
Throughout our conversation, the panelists illustrated the complex and often paradoxical relationship between religion and science in history. Taken together, these insights show that scientific progress has historically been shaped by both the structures that nurture knowledge and the freedom to question, investigate, and innovate. Understanding this interplay not only deepens our appreciation of history, but also offers important lessons for modern science education. where fostering curiosity, inclusivity, and critical thinking remains essential. Once again, thank you to our panelists, Mom Vivine, Mom Regine, and Mom Irish, for this episode's insightful discussion. As we have seen, history shows us that scientific progress is shaped not only by knowledge and resources, but also by the freedom to question and explore. But this is just one piece of the puzzle. In our next episode, we'll dive even deeper into the intriguing question: to what extent is change in science education driven by internal discovery versus external shocks like wars, plagues, or economic shifts? We'll compare the key historical studies and see how crises have sometimes sparked innovation in ways that stability never could. You'll be surprised by how turbulence has fueled the evolution of knowledge. See you in the next episode of SciEd Talakayan Podcast.